All right, Ike, here we go again with another fabulous episode. Great show last week. If you haven't heard the episode with our good friend Nick Dimbleby, definitely worth popping backwards in time and grabbing that. Man, he is just a ton of fun to talk to. Really
very, very talented fellow, and some great stories from travels around the world and taking pictures of Land Rovers in exotic locations with interesting people. Super fascinating fellow, and we'll definitely have him back on the show.
Oh yeah, no question. I feel like we're just scratching the proverbial surface of his body of work. In the news this week, the big news this week is just like all kinds of defenders. It seems to be what everybody is talking about.
Absolutely.
Of course, the 130, which we've talked about, which at any moment now should be actually talked about by Land Rover. I'm not sure what their release schedule. I don't know if they're waiting for an auto show or something to start talking about.
I think they're waiting for chips.
Oh, yeah, the chips. Yeah, even if they announced that they couldn't build it, right?
Just like any good Mexican restaurant, there is a time where you're waiting for chips. And I think that's where they're at. They're waiting for chips to build more cars. And in the meantime, they're using their chips sparingly, making various special editions, and this is no exception. I think that this is probably going to be upmarket, low volume, sort of production, at least initially, until they can, really produce in scale, which it's tricky for a lot of auto manufacturers right now.
Well, and it sounds like one of the new models might be a sort of super Defender, sort of a Range Rover class Defender, which, people like Chelsea Tractors and Twisted and folks like that have been doing, with the classic Defender, making an ultra luxury version. Land Rover had previously never really done that with the classic Defender. They'd sort of stuck to, like, there were nicer, sort of special editions of it, but there weren't like, insano Range Rover class ones. But now it sounds like they're going to do that, which fits with your buddy Terry Valeri's theory of making a much more upscale Jaguar Land Rover going forward.
I mean, I think they have to. They don't really have an option.
Yeah.
They're kind of forced into that. If you can't produce more vehicles, you got two types of businesses. Quantity or margin.
Yeah.
And so if you're not selling quantity, you have to make margin. And the way to do that is to move them up market even further. Just kind of unfortunate because I always really like the working vehicles, that Land Rover has produced historically, but it's just not viable, at least in the current climate. So what do you do?
Yep.
You gotta produce these cars, and when will it end? How luxurious can you get? The earlier Defenders, I don't think the architecture really supported a super luxury model.
See, guys, you couldn't keep water out of the inside of the car. That makes it a little
very
tough.
difficult.
Yeah, it makes it a little
very
tough.
difficult to keep water out of the inside of the car. Mm-hmm. So I think with the new generation, you're going to see even more luxurious editions, Louis Vuitton editions.
Oh, I can't wait.
Gucci editions. Massaging foot pedals.
Oh.
Heated exterior visors.
Oh, yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be amazing. I really do think that what the Defender has been missing is super yacht decking material used throughout the car, not regular yacht material. I don't want anything below like a 45-foot long yacht cut up and then used as flooring material in my Defender. I think that's the only way. When Larry Ellison is done with it, they make 4 Defenders out of it. So that's
narwhal skin seats.
They're so supple. I mean, that's the thing.
They're so
supple. The beluga backed headrests are really, they've got that natural bump in them already. So it's super comfortable. Super comfortable.
Yeah. Those are actually really squishy. I don't know if you've ever been around a beluga whale. Those things are squishy.
Poked a beluga?
Yeah. Next time you're around one, just poke it. It's really squishy.
It's super, super satisfying.
They love it.
So speaking of poking a beluga, what's up in the workshop this week, Ike? What you guys working on up there in beautiful Oregon? Is it still 900 degrees outside?
It isn't. No, it hasn't been 900 degrees for some time, but it has been in the 70 to 80 degree Fahrenheit range, which has actually been pretty pleasant to work on. Crazy old Land Rovers. We've had some good ones in the shop. We have the Nada station wagons that I think I might have mentioned on a previous episode. We've got 2 of those in the shop right now. Mm-hmm. And so they have some peculiarities, I will say.
You have like 5% of all remaining Nadas or something right now, and you're working up two of them.
There were originally 811 for those people that don't know. Nada station wagons built in 1967, and I think somewhere in the region of like 813 still exist. The amazing number still exists because they were expensive to buy when they were new, and people were very reluctant to throw them away.
Yeah.
But no one else was willing to buy them,
right?
Because because at that time it was difficult to get parts for them, and it's a little bit easier now. But some things you got to know what you're doing.
In the 6-cylinder engine, the Westlake head, it looks like there's an exhaust pipe grafted on to the top of the motor. It is a crazy car, but it is the sort of ultimate North American car.
And smooth to drive. So smooth. The engine just runs really smooth, runs down the highway really nicely. They're cool cars, but they just require a little bit more care and feeding than some of the models. But we've got a couple really good examples that we're kind of recommissioning or we're refurbishing. So those are cool. And then I have a 49 build, 80-inch headlights behind the grill, military truck that we're doing a mechanical sort of refurbish on, and just rebuilt the transmission, got that thing back in the car, and it's running and driving again for the first time in like many, many years. So we are really excited about that thing. That thing is cool.
And how about Jason Momoa motorcycle number 2? Has it killed you yet?
It's been trying.
Yeah.
It's been trying. Yeah, it's a 1926 Harley Davidson, and that thing is even more primitive and difficult to operate than the 41.
The tires are made out of milled stone, right?
I think I would describe the driving experience as standing next to a pan of cooking bacon too closely. There's just all these hot little bits of oil all over you. It's horrible. It's really horrible riding experience. I hate it, but also love it.
Yeah, sounds wonderful.
Yeah. And then we are making progress on the wooden shooting brake 80-inch. That thing is coming along. Hopefully I can share pictures of that sometime in the near future, and maybe we'll do a little episode segment on that thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely a really special build, really cool car. Sort of a woody wagon meets a Land Rover 80-inch, so I'm excited to make some progress on that thing.
It's a super cool car. I can't wait.
How about you? What do you got going on?
This week we're getting ready to take the 80-inch a couple hundred miles away to a show in the next month or so. So it has been going through thoroughly. Finally have my brand new 1951 steering box dropped into the car, still getting that dialed in. But it is pretty crazy to see a modern Land Rover modern Land Rover original part sticker on a steering box that is from the 1950s. It's pretty cool. Very, very cool.
That is a really cool thing. It's cool that they made those. Unfortunately, they don't necessarily still need them, but it is cool that we can use them in the meantime. And
they're great. I mean, it's going to be great. So that's going through some brakes work. Needs to work on the rear brakes and a couple of other things, fit in some extra gauges, get a thermocouple wired up to the thermostat so that I know if it is overheating or about to blow up, or if any of the tires are going to fall off or any of that sort of business. But getting that ready to go, and then a whole bunch of
the wheel sensor to determine if the wheels are about to come off.
Yeah, the wheel disconnection sensor, which is a car driving next to you saying like, "Hey, there's no lug nuts on that wheel."
I had a lady pull up next to me, a very lovely Hispanic lady pulled up next to me and was very kind enough to say, "You have no light." As I was driving my 1957 88-inch Series 1 in the dusk the other evening, and I had to jiggle the ignition switch to get the taillights to work.
Yep. That's how it goes.
That's old cars for you.
We've had Chris's Mini in doing some work on it as well. I've got a little bit of the cooling system to work through, get that working. It's braking now properly, steering properly. That car has been off the road for a long time. I have to have Chris, but it might be 10 years or something. So that's been gone through fairly thoroughly now, and with the exception of a little bit of an overheating thing that I think we've nipped now, we're good to go. So he and I will be taking not nearly as old cars as you and Linus, but not nearly as far, but a couple old cars pretty far away, which is always a ton of fun. And then a bunch of parts have come for the Stage 1 one to fix up the last little bits of things that are wrong with that car. Of course, every oil seal that can be leaking is leaking, so a full round of re-sealing everything, new drive flanges and new pinion flanges and a few of those sort of things. So we'll get her all sorted, and that car will be good as new. I've been driving Stage 1 a lot, actually, and it is a lot of fun. It's great. It's great to have a Series 3 long wheelbase car that actually keeps up with freeway traffic. It's kind of a novel. I mean, it sounds a little bit like you're flying a B-52, but it keeps up, which is a lot of fun. So I like that car a lot.
It's probably about as safe as that.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. The B-52 is probably safer. Well, being shot at, I think it's still safer in the B-52 than simply driving.
Yeah. What do they say about those things? The 30-day lifespan for B-52 crews?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Like
I think the average Land Rover owner on the freeway is at 28 days or something like that.
28 days. I think that's a movie.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so speaking of the British military and sort of the kind of vehicles that they like, today's Britain's top model is a Land Rover that probably most people haven't heard a lot about. This is really a niche vehicle, but as you know,
it's a bit obscure.
Ike, the forward control vehicles, loved by the military, the 101 forward control in all of its different variants, the Vampire radio car, the ambulance cars, the standard drop side cars, super fun and loved by the British military up until like the 90s, like they were still using 101s. It's crazy. And in fact, the impetus for this vehicle, the SMC Engineering Land Rover Forward Control, which is, there's two variants, the FC82 and the FC83, are conversion vehicles. And they are forward controls, essentially forward control versions, more or less of the Stage 1.
Yeah, no, these are interesting cars, and obviously these people thought that there was, a expanded military market or additional military market for a forward control truck, and there is. Obviously militaries around the world use forward control cars, and for those listeners that don't know, forward control refers to a vehicle where you sit above the front wheels, and that gives a larger load space within a certain wheelbase, compared to what the British refer to as a bonneted control vehicle, where you have a hood or a bonnet in front of the driver covering the engine. So, this company thought, hey, there's an opportunity here. We're going to invest a ton of money and time into building a forward control vehicle out of a vehicle that is a standard control or bonneted control type car. And they chose the Stage 1. Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways, I like it because it's definitely more Land Rover-esque than the 101.
It looks a lot like a 2B. I mean, it has a very 2B-esque kind of look, except it's much bigger.
And I love that. Yeah. I love that about the 2B. You look at the 2B and you're like, oh, that's a Land Rover. It's just a weird one.
It's just a weird little fender thing.
It's got the same doors and the same windshield and the same cab. And, that's what's cool about this vehicle is it uses a lot of existing Land Rover componentry, and that's why it's neat. Unfortunately, drivetrain-wise, it's nothing very novel. It has basically the same drivetrain as the Stage 1, which has the same drivetrain as the 101. And so I'm guessing the military was like, you know what, this is a lot like what we already have. Yeah. It's not really different enough or better enough for us to merit a purchase or a big order. So I think it was sort of destined to fail. And in that way, it reminds me a lot of the Carmichael conversion that we talked about a few weeks ago that was for sale. That truck, another company thought, well, forward control would be a great idea. And then, Land Rover came by and made their own, and that wiped out any market that they may have had.
Yeah, exactly. And that was sort of it. And these vehicles, were not particularly inexpensive. You could have a regular Stage 1 converted for about £6,000. And remember, this is in the, the late 70s, early 80s. A completely done vehicle with, the sort of drop side pickup and the whole deal would cost about £13,000. So, it was a significant cost over the base vehicle. And a very, very specific, they were sort of targeting the military, I think, as the big customer. Instead, though, the military decided they're just going to refurb all their 101s and did a program where they went through, they got the engines updated and did some basic overhaul work and just kept those suckers going probably for too long. Now, I don't know what the British military uses now. Do they use the same kind of LMTVs that the American military does, or? an Oshkosh or something like that, something from Oshkosh or something.
In this class, for some time they were using Pinzgauers.
Oh, yeah.
And the Australian Pinzgauer production was moved to England.
Right.
But I don't honestly know what they're using now. But they had moved the Magna Steyr, newest generation of the Pinzgauer, their production to the UK, and I think that was kind of their stopgap or interim replacement for the 101. But I'm not sure what they use. They probably buy all kinds of different stuff, trucks, and
the modern British modern air quotes British Pinzgauers are really cool. They're a really nice update to the classic Swiss Army ones. They're neat. They're
water cooled 5-cylinder turbo diesel. They're a lot of 6-wheel drive. The American Special Forces use them, and occasionally you see them on Government Planet, all stripped down, painted pink for desert service. But some of those have definitely turned up on the secondhand civilian market. Pretty interesting vehicles. They got a machine gun ring on the top, and it's a little more military than is what my style. But some people love them. They're cool vehicles. Yeah,
they are neat. I've always wanted one of these days a classic Pinzgauer, the 4-wheel drive version. I would love one of those. I don't have room, even for the cars that I have.
In a later episode of things that Ike buys at random, I bought a Pinzgauer in Baja, California, and we drove it back from Mexico. And so I have some experience with Pinzgauers. They're pretty cool vehicles, very over-engineered, very Austrian.
But I love the backbone style chassis and everything. Anyways, it's for another episode, but that'll have to go in the collection at some point.
They're small too, 86
they're tiny.
wheelbase.
Yeah, that's the thing. Most people look at them and they're like, "Oh, it's a giant forward control vehicle," but it's not significantly larger than a Defender.
It's actually smaller than the Defender in wheelbase. Yeah. Cool trucks. The other thing that the FC82s and 83s remind me of is the Llama, which is kind of Land Rover's own forward control that they built, based on Defender componentry, sort of immediately after this generation of vehicle. Land Rover was coming out with the Defender, and this company decided that they were going to base theirs on the older generation Stage 1. Well, of course, that's probably not going to be very appealing to militaries around the world. So, the Llama was also, kind of neat. It's a little less Land Rover-y. It has like a fiberglass cab, but it has Land Rover componentry. It's also forward control, but it's more based on the early Defender parts. And it was short-lived project. Basically Land Rover decided, hey, we're not going to...
They only made a few of them, right? Dunsfold has one, right?
I want to say 9, something like that, but certainly not many. And there's a few floating around, and one always turns up for sale periodically. It's not a particularly beloved, prototype or vehicle. It doesn't engender warm, fuzzy feelings when people look at it. It doesn't have a lot of curb appeal, but it is interesting and sad that it's kind of the last of the true working vehicles that Land Rover produced. That was like, we're going to make trucks. We're going to make actual heavy duty trucks. And then they were like, nah, I guess we're not.
As it turns out, Mel, maybe not.
As it turns out, I think we're over that. So they just decided they weren't going to do it.
So this week's Tip Top Tech Tip, this was actually a request from one of our Patreon supporters asking about retro modding. I had a great opportunity to drive a new acquaintance's retro modded LS3 Defender over the weekend, and it's insane to have a motor with that kind of horsepower in a Defender. But this was a very well put together car, and handled great, stopped great, turned great, did all the things that a regular car should do. But it was a little weird because you look at it, from 10 feet away, and you'd think there'd think about it, but then it can drag race somebody. So kind of interesting. But this question was more specifically about the steering and the braking. So, as we have talked about many times in the past, especially ill-adjusted, but even appropriately adjusted steering for your series Land Rover can sometimes be an upper body workout that you might not be looking for necessarily, especially a lot of slow speed driving, making big arcing turns could be a little bit of a workout. But a lot of people do the sort of retro mod where they take a newer component, a power steering component, and they apply that to their Land Rover. And that's something that you guys do quite a bit, right?
That's right. Yeah. And we should mention that this is the sort of personal touch that you'll get with a Patreon subscription is tailored radio articles to your particular questions and needs.
We'll talk about basically anything. I mean, you put it on there, we're going to talk about it. We have no filter. There is no QC department here. It's just you type it in and we talk about it. That's literally
but this is something we do quite a bit of at Pangolin 4x4. And for those of you that aren't familiar, you can check us out on Instagram. But we do a lot of retro mod type stuff. We get a lot of customers that are like, I would say generally I'm averse to doing these sorts of modifications unless you have a good reason. And some people have great reasons. They're old or they're very weak or they have a missing arm or, there's a lot of reasons to have power steering. And I would say 90% of the time, driving a Series Land Rover or early Defender without power steering is fine. Yeah. But there is 10% of the time where it can be really aggravating. And that 10% of the time is things like slow speed, parallel parking, or slowly negotiating. Slowly negotiating off-road obstacles. It can be really tiresome and sometimes very difficult to negotiate that stuff with manual steering. And so we get calls and requests for power steering. And generally, a traditional power steering conversion to a Series Land Rover or less so to an early Defender because there's a factory sort of plug-in for that. But on the Series cars, there really isn't a factory-style solution. So to do a conventional power steering system requires, the installation of a hydraulic power steering box mounted to the chassis. So the chassis has to be modified with mountings and, the steering rods and steering geometry has to change for that. Different steering drop arm or pitman arm, some people call it. And then the steering column that connects the steering wheel to the box also has to be changed or custom made. And so there's various weldings and modifications and clearances that need to be made for those components. So it's pretty involved, a lot of, machining and welding and modification. And in addition to that, you have to have a hydraulic pump attached to your motor, custom brackets for that, custom hoses between the pump and the steering box. So there's a lot of parts involved, so it gets expensive from a parts perspective. And then the labor is another componentry. If you're not a welder, fabricator, mechanic, it gets very expensive to do that sort of installation. So there's other solutions that people have come up with to sort of skirt that, conventional power steering installation. And a couple of those are hydraulic ram. And a lot of early classic cars with power steering used a hydraulic ram as a kind of attached to maybe the frame in one place and then the steering rods in another. And then it had a hydraulic pump and it drove the rams. And that left the original steering system in place and you added this over the top. Some of the problems with that is the faster the engine goes, the faster it wants to pump. And then the steering gets kind of twitchy at higher speeds. It's really great at low speeds. It has kind of feeling because it's not pumping out as much fluid. But then at higher speeds, maybe it's kind of twitchy and it wants to move the wheels a little too easily. And
that's something that a very high-end rock crawler will have the full hydraulic ram steering system, so you can
double acting hydraulic ram,
45 tall tires at 0 speed. You can sort of move around. So that's pretty common still in those kind of cars.
It's definitely a similar type of system, but it's over the top of the existing system. And the idea being that you still have regular steering if your engine stalls or whatever, maybe hydraulic failure or whatever. So those are kind of the pros and cons to that system. And then something that people are doing a little more recently is a lot of modern cars come with an electric assist to the original steering. And so many cars, I think Corvettes and some electric cars, most electric cars, they will come with an electric assist steering unit, and some people are grafting those into the steering column of a Series Land Rover unit. The steering column. And so that's become popular. I think there's even some companies offering conversions for those. And I think that's probably fine in like a more or less stock configuration. But the limitation of that system is that you are leaving the weakest links of the Land Rover steering system downstream from the hydraulic assist. Right. So instead of the hydraulic ram, which is upstream from those weaker components, this is downstream from those, the weaker components are downstream from the assisting parts. So if you put that above the steering box, for example, the steering fork, which is relatively fragile and weak, I'm concerned that would put enough force on that to break it, because I can break one if I'm really turning on a steering wheel. I can break those forks if I'm stuck in a ditch off road, and I've done that inadvertently a couple of times and learned my lesson.
Yeah.
So that would be my fear with that. I've never installed one of those systems, but for a purely street-driven vehicle, it's probably great.
Yeah. Good point. Well, and I think that may be the key element there is if the day-to-day use of the car is on road, it's a street-used vehicle, maybe it's dirt roads or something, but there's not any serious, difficult off-highway travel planned with it, then I think all those, solutions make a lot of sense. It makes the car a little more manners on road and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. I have mixed feelings about people putting air conditioning in and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think fundamentally, I feel like if that's what gets you out driving that car an awful lot, then do it. If without that, it's going to stay in your garage and you're not going to take it out, and you're going to be hesitant to take it to a quick trip to the mall or to drop the kids off at school in it or whatever, then do what you need to do. Put the seatbelts in, do the turn signals, do the whatever it is to get you to drive the car. Because I think that, for me, the joy is struggling with all of the original parts in the car. But that's not everybody's cup of tea,
It isn't. And some people, they come and they complain that their steering's awful. It's wandering everywhere. It's really heavy. There's various problems. And I would say almost always those complaints can be rectified without power steering.
Yep.
So sometimes it's easy as just underinflated tires. That if you have tires that are underinflated, it's going to have a bigger contact patch with the ground and be harder to turn. And sometimes just pumping up the tires makes it easier. But other times, there's mechanical components that are worn or out of service. They don't have enough oil. They have too much tension or worn bearings, and, all that sort of thing causes extra force on the steering. There's no reason that the average, person who is not, infirm can't steer a Series Land Rover. They're not particularly heavy steering vehicles. So yeah, before you were like, I definitely need power steering, maybe just check everything out, make sure it's in good condition and adjusted properly and set to spec. Yeah,
it's sort of like the Leaf, traditional Leafs versus parabolics, the same sort of thing. Like if you're judging against a 40 or 50 or 60, in some cases, old set of Leaf springs, then maybe consider either A, servicing them, or B, compare them to a new set of Leafs before completely changing everything over. So sort of the same thing.
Well, I think we were going to do brakes too, but let's save that for the next episode, and let's move on to our famous Land Rover owner of the week.
Oh, without question, everyone's favorite segment, and one we've taken a break from for a little while. Let's be honest; it's been weeks, and I think the audience demands a famous Land Rover owner of the week at least. Once a month. So, Ike,
I've gotten 4 carrier pigeons to that effect.
Yeah, it's 3 of them were shot down in transit, but 1 did make it, and so
one made it.
We heard
one made
loud and clear. So, Ike, what did the Rube Goldberg machine of Land Rover owners spit out for us this week?
It's a Heath Robinson.
The Heath Robinson, yes, of course.
Heath Robinson.
The Heath Robinson machine.
We got Jamie Oliver this week, who is, the culinary genius / Land Rover enthusiast. And this is someone that I've heard a little bit about, and I've seen some press on this fellow. He does a lot of, cooking in schools and, trying to encourage, average folks and so forth to cook.
Yeah, to cook, and I think to eat healthy too. Like he's an interesting guy. Seems like a great British gentleman. He owns at least one Series Land Rover. He has a Series 388 inch that he recently had restored. I think he still has it, and he's used in a couple of his different programs. He's used a few different Land Rovers, probably the most famous of which being a very blue colored Defender 90 with like a white rally wheel on it that was put together by your favorite folks over at Twisted Automotive. There's no insane body.
Did it have a rope wrapped around the bumper and then draped over the fenders?
I'm certain they do. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure they do. I'm sure that's true.
Has to.
You can't sell a car with, Gordon Ramsay recently just bought one of those $200,000 James Bond edition ones, and sure enough, rope attached, like you're gonna moor a boat.
The twisted moniker refers to the rope.
The rope is twisted, yes. But I think most famously, Jamie Oliver was gifted / collaborated with / I don't know what the deal is, a Discovery 5 built by our good friends at Special Vehicle Operations there in Oxfordshire. And it is a Land Rover Discovery mobile kitchen. And I don't.
Yeah, this was done pre-pandemic, but it is definitely an interesting vehicle, interesting collaboration, and I don't know everything about it, but I know it has a few special features related to cooking.
Well, I thought that you might want to go over a list of those features. Now, I have the full list here, and we're going to play a new segment on the podcast here, specifically designed for this particular vehicle, where I have the list of the actual features and possibly some features that I've added myself. And we're going to play a rousing game of real or not real feature. And so I'm just going to lay them out for you. I'm going to keep track of your score. And we'll see at the end if you are in fact the experts that you claim to be when it comes to Jamie Oliver Land Rovers. So the first thing is, and it is difficult to say these with a straight face, although they're equally as ridiculous if they're real or made up. A power takeoff for kitchen gadgets that is run by the engine and allows you to plug different implements into the front grille of the Land Rover behind the Land Rover emblem. You can plug in different implements and drive them off of the engine of the Discovery 5.
This is like a KitchenAid mixer drive.
It's exactly that.
Front.
It is exactly that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that's a real feature.
That is correct. That is a real feature of this car. 1 point so far. There is inside of the engine bay, if you lift up the hood, you will find a convenient slow cooker built right into the engine. It is a great place to keep food simmering for a long period of time with the diesel fuel fumes and things mixing around in there. So an engine bay mounted slow cooker.
Wow, I feel like I've seen a lot of like engine cooking, and maybe I've possibly done some engine cooking, manifold burrito warmers, and these sorts of things. Yeah. I mean, that sounds pretty plausible. I'm going to say that one's also real.
That is a real thing. That is actually part of the car. All right. The next thing is in the glove box, there is something called a potato ricer, which allows you to take a peeled potato and put it in and turn, and it produces a sort of riced potato, which I think Jamie Oliver, he prefers that over a grain or rice or something like that. It's a healthier alternative. You can do it with cauliflower, all kinds of things.
I'm gonna say, because it's potato based and he's all about healthy cooking, that the glove box mounted potato ricer is not a real feature.
That is not, in fact, a real feature of the car. That is not a real feature of the car.
Ooh, it's looking good.
It's looking good so far. So far, you're 3 for 3, my friend. This is where things get a little more difficult, though. This is going to be a little bit. So in the rear of the car, where the rear, the sort of D-pillar windows are, there is a rear window herb garden with the ability to put 7 different herb plants in there. And because of the rear window, it creates a small greenhouse back there and allows those fresh herbs to be grown while you drive around in the Discovery.
That's ridiculous. I mean, part of me thinks that that's fake, but every time I see one of the new Defenders with the like suitcase on the side, I think like, oh, it's like a window box. You just have some tulips in there or something like that as you drive along. I'm going to go against my better judgment. I feel like this is not a real thing, but my answer is going to be this is a real thing, this side herb box.
That is a real feature of the car, a side-mounted herb box. Now the other rear window.
Somebody has to water that.
Seriously,
stuff
I don't know how it gets. It doesn't make any sense at all.
All this stuff growing in there that doesn't seem like it's sustainable.
I don't know how it's sustainable. So the other rear window, this was, I think, a precursor to the Defender's add-on feature. The other rear window opens up to reveal an actual spice rack. A real spice rack where the Defender has an externally mounted spice rack. This is an actual spice rack.
That's probably an actual feature. That seems reasonable.
That is a reasonable.
Given the fact that
that's a real feature. That's actually part of the car.
So one side is spices, and the other side is growing
herbs,
spices.
fresh herbs. It makes total sense.
Herbs.
So
makes total sense.
There is a 10-gallon fresh water tank with the ability to produce either flat or sparkling water.
What? I'm going to say that's not a real feature.
That is not a real feature.
I wish it were.
Yeah.
I wish it were.
There is a.
It would make sense if when you're cooking, you need water.
Yeah.
I mean, the sparkling thing is really what tripped me on that one. I just didn't expect it to have sparkling water.
The fold-out load space kitchen with 2 burners and prep table that all just pulls out of the back of the Discovery.
That's a real feature.
Yeah, that's easily a 40-inch flat screen television.
Ooh, 40 inches? No, that's not a real feature.
That is a real feature of the car.
What?
It's off the end. It's off the end of the cook surface. There's a 40-inch flat screen television, so you can watch Jamie Oliver's cooking shows while he cooks you food in the back of his Land Rover.
Yeah, that's a little. I mean, that's a little egotistical to be like, watch me cooking food while I watch you cook food. Do you remember the show? I can't even remember. It's like an upgrade or hot rodding show with Exhibit, the rapper.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And he would be like, "Yo, dog, I heard you liked TV, so I put a TV in your TV." Like all that kind of stuff.
Everything has a TV. Everything is like Jesus. So many TVs.
Yeah, that sounds like that. You can watch me cook food while I cook your food.
Sun visor mounted tortilla press. So there is above the sun visor.
No, that's not a real feature.
Sun visor.
Although I would use that.
Yeah.
I would use that.
A wheel mounted butter churn. As part of the hub system of each wheel, there is a butter churn attached so that you can churn butter while you're on the way to your destination.
I feel like that is an interesting way to prepare food, is use the wheels to mix it. But I feel like butter churn goes against the healthy cooking thing.
You've also got to think of the speed the vehicle is traveling at with butter in the wheels. I don't know.
Butter in the wheels. I'm going to say that's not
That
a feature.
is a real feature of the car.
Damn it.
That is a real feature of the car.
Damn it.
Yeah. A rear seat deep fryer. So below the rear seats in the back, they lift up to reveal a deep fryer. That is not a real feature.
That is not.
Of the car.
I mean, every car that has children in it or otherwise, there are some French fries in the seats. I'm pretty sure.
This actually cooks French fries under the seat, though, so it's perfect.
That's not accurate.
Center console mounted 2-slice toaster with a behind the radio jam shelf.
Now, this I have to admit that I know is a feature of the vehicle. I know it, and I actually love this feature.
Yeah. It's
despite the fact that once you drop your cell phone in the toaster in the center of your console, just like what?
It's amazing.
It doesn't seem.
It takes inductive charging to a whole new level. Level. And finally, a front deployable rotisserie, which is driven off of the PTO and allows you to cook chickens over charcoal off the front of the vehicle.
I'm going to say that's a realistic feature.
Also a real feature. Well, that is an exceptional score. Only 3 wrong. Or I'm sorry, 2 wrong. The rear seat deep fryer. The rear seat deep fryer is not wrong. The wheel mounted butter churn is a real feature of the car.
Never would have thought.
And the 40-inch flat screen, also a very much off-brand.
Doesn't seem integral to cooking. No,
it doesn't seem like you really need that. So you can sign up for for your own SVO, Jamie Oliver edition. I'm sure if you were interested in it, no one could ever have that. I'm certain it's not street legal, given the butter churn wheels and everything else. I think it feels like a really bad idea to drive that car anywhere ever. But if you do Google it, you can actually find the Jamie Oliver Land Rover Discovery blueprint that outlines all of these different features of the car with great photos and stuff. It is the most absurd. It's like Top Gear made a car, but it's real.
One of the things that it seems it's difficult to understand about this car is, like, you know, they don't necessarily help you cook one particular type of meal, or, you know, like you've seen the food trucks with like pizza ovens, or it's like more specialized. But this one you can like make some toast and rotisserie chicken, and I don't know, have some herbs on it.
It's totally random. It's more like Land Rover engineers are like, well, what could we do? They're like, wheel mounted butter churn. They're like, that's right, Steve. That's exactly what we need. Get on that.
The seats are actually tofu.
Yeah, they're actually made. The car is it's a beautiful, and drop it right into the fryer.
Have you seen that Japanese game show where the people are trapped in an escape room and they have to find their way out by determining which part of the room is made of food? And it's all these people going around tasting like doorknobs and shoes and table legs and things in an effort to get out of this escape room.
Oh, no, I haven't, but
this car reminds me of that.
It's exactly right. This is the Japanese escape room of automotive.
Is this a real feature of a car? Yeah, it is.
Well, Ike, it has been a wonderful journey through the oddities of Jamie Oliver's Discovery, and a pleasure to chat as always. For those of you who have not yet checked out the Patreon, we encourage you as always to do that, as there's great things on there. And hey, if you like the show, why not tell a friend to stay away, because that's not a nice thing to do to somebody else, or maybe see if they want to check it out.
If you join our Patreon, we will give you a personalized phone greeting.
Yeah, Ike is going to call you in any hour of the day. You can't specify the time, and you also can't specify the amount of time he stays on the phone with you, or the topic of conversation. But you will get that. You will get that. We'll make that happen. Like it or not, that's going to happen. So.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Steven.
It's been a slice. We'll see you next week.
All right. Take care. Looking forward to it.